Coming up, you will be learning with style with Sylvia Bridges on Well Defined.
And we're hitting the yard to hear from you on Capitol Hill.
All this and much more, you're watching Topicality. Welcome back. This is Topicality. I'm your host, Micah Beard, and this is
Dr. Ron Goodwin. I'm a faculty member here at Prairie View A&M University.
And today we're getting ready to talk about initiatives, past initiatives, and just the political climate today. This is a well-respected faculty member, leader of the Division of Social Sciences here. And the first question we have for you today is, how do initiatives today compare to past political transition projects, such as Project 2025 and the New Deal?
So a lot of the things that we see today is kind of in a different space than what we are typically accustomed to. The New Deal was born out of the Depression and the crisis and hardships caused by the Depression. Some of the initiatives that we see today are more ideological in nature, and maybe there's more of what could be termed a perceived crisis and not necessarily an actual crisis. So this is a little bit different than what we've seen before.
Yes, sir.
This is not necessarily addressing problems as much as it is addressing those issues that are perceived to be problems by a segment of our society. So that makes it different from a historical context.
Okay. And just what do you see as the possible repercussions of being unconscious to the current state of the world?
So one of the things that the Black community has experienced over the last few decades is a shift in American culture and American politics away from Jim Crow segregation. So your generation definitely enjoys benefits, a lifestyle that your grandparents and great-grandparents could have only dreamt of.
Yes, sir.
So by not really engaging in that history and understanding that history, I think there's a real sense that some of the gains that have been made may be lost or reversed right out from under you. And
Sure.
by the time one recognizes that, hey, this is different, it could be too late.
Yes, sir.
And maybe that's one of the concerns, the sky is falling kind of thing.
Okay.
No one knows exactly what's going to happen. Nobody has a crystal ball. But when you watch some of the movements, the political and social movements, it will definitely make you question, are we undoing some things that previous generations fought hard to achieve?
Yes, sir. What are some examples of just things that we fought hard to achieve and laws we've come to make? What are some examples of things that could be undone?
Voting.
Voting?
Without a doubt. That's the first thing that comes to mind.
Yes, sir.
Voting is a privilege, is a right.
Absolutely, yes, sir.
But now we are in an environment where our democracy wants to limit voting participation. And democracy, by definition, is complete inclusion of every citizen. But there are different strategies and laws that are being created that would limit and restrict, make it more difficult for one to vote.
Yes, sir.
And that's dangerous.
Absolutely.
In a democracy. And that's one thing, when we go back 60 years, that the traditional civil rights movement really fought hard to gain that right to participate in their own governance. And it's a dangerous thing to think that could be undone.
Yes, sir.
Quickly.
Absolutely. Yes, I believe it's very dangerous. And here on Topicality, we absolutely just preach the power of voting, and we encourage students and young voters to get out and do their part. And so thinking about that, how would you encourage people at our own HBCU and students to engage with the history that we need to know so much?
So there has to be an understanding of not just the history of the Black community, but a history of the community in which one is engaged in.
Yes, sir.
Too many students are being encouraged to vote a certain way, and they're following the Pied Piper.
Okay.
And they're not really getting the information for themselves or identify, this is what's important to me at this particular moment in my life. Because you're not you per se.
Yes, sir, of course.
But one is not engaged in what's important to me.
Okay.
You know,
Yes,
what's
sir.
important to you at 20 may not be what's important to you at 40. But today, what are those issues that are important to you? And you need to find out which politicians at the local community, county, state, what policies are out there that addresses your concerns.
Yes, sir.
If your concern is the driving age, then you need to understand, why is that a concern? How do you stand on that? Not allow someone to tell you, you should be upset about this policy. And then you as a young person, yeah, I'm upset about it. Well, if I ask you why, well, because so-and-so said so.
Yes, sir.
Wrong answer. Wrong answer. So young people today need to be engaged and understand their own issues and understand what's important to them and be judicious about where they get their information from.
Yes, sir.
Just because it's online doesn't mean it's reputable. Just because somebody has a good cadence and they're charismatic doesn't mean they know what they're talking about.
Yes, sir.
So you've got to be very careful, not you, but be very careful about where you get your information from, what that information looks like, and how to use that power.
Yes, sir.
Because voting is powerful, and folks want to use that vote, hopefully for your benefit, for the benefit of the community, and not for their benefit.
So interesting that you bring up the online aspect. As we talked about on Topicality before, that's very important about where you're getting your information from, what are you studying, what are you seeing? And as someone who's seen, us go from a political age of getting, not as much information online and seeing young people get a lot of information, just even political elections have information come through online. How do you suggest we navigate that and break that kind of curse? Or just what are even some things that you have seen, the dangers you've seen of just the evolution of technology and political action?
So I believe that some young people, they want to be engaged, but they're not quite sure how to go about it.
Okay.
So instead of asking their elders, they're asking each other. That's the blind leading the blind.
Absolutely.
Why am I asking? You don't know.
Yes, sir.
I need to ask somebody that may have a little more experience. So here we go with this whole issue, this generation divide, gap, whatever you want to call it, where I need to be able to trust my elders. I need to be able to ask them questions.
Yes, sir.
What do you think? What does this look like? Have you seen this before? Talk to me about what's going on. And listen to what they have to say. Just because somebody is older doesn't mean they don't know. Look, everybody wasn't born 50 years old. Okay, so a lot of folks have been where you are, understanding that this is the time I'm trying to develop my own identity. I'm trying to figure out where my place in this world is. Every person's been there. And if they're lucky enough to have survived it, they've got a story to tell. And they may want to share that story.
Yes, sir.
But do you want to hear that story?
Yes, sir.
And if you want to hear it, ask, hey, what do you think about this? Is sports and entertainment my only way to a secure future, a secure financial future? And listen to what, to that, have that conversation.
Yes, sir.
And that conversation, I don't think is being had enough.
Okay.
And I'm not going to blanket statement and say, it's not happening at all. I'm sure it is. But I question whether or not it's happening enough. So folks are getting their information from sources that may not be as credible as it could be. And then there are people around you who can share their experiences on what they've seen, but you've got to reach out to them.
Yes, sir.
You know, and that's just a dynamic. We don't always trust, as you know, when I was young, I didn't always ask my elders questions. And then when I got to a point where I was asking, I couldn't get enough because it made sense to me, because I could see it around me like, oh, okay, I see that.
Yes,
and when folks are telling me things, you know, watch out for these, you know, different things when you're dating, or, you know, you're thinking about what a future mate might look like. And, you know, some of the fellas at the barbershop would say, you know, sometimes the package might look good, but that's not the one. And then you, well, why not? Well, what is it? And then
Yes,
you
sir.
begin to say, that makes sense. So I think that there's some information that's out there. Young people definitely need to be involved in the political process, the political processes, but they need to be careful at the same time. And, you know, at some point, it's just time to grow up and begin to ask some grown folk questions.
Yes, sir.
You know.
So while asking those grown folk questions and engaging with family, you know that can produce some environments, just the environments you're around can produce certain political mindsets, and you get them from your family, you may not even question them.
Right.
So with you bringing up that point and us
Right.
talking about the effects of social media,
Right.
how do I make that distinction of what do I think and what do I believe in when I have, you know, your family telling you certain thing to believe in, social media,
Right.
you know, a little bit of programming going on.
Right,
How do
right.
you make those distinctions?
So, one, you always have to be mindful and respectful of where your elders are coming from.
Yes, sir.
And when you try to understand that, then that helps you understand kind of why they feel the way that they do. Now, there's some challenges that your elders have gone through that you don't face.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
So you kind of, you weigh that and say, I hear you, but I've got these other challenges that I may not be able to apply what you went through to where I am today. But there's some things that are just basic. So you have to understand, this is where I am at this particular moment. Where am I trying to go? What am I trying to do? Now, yes, there's a political environment at play, but at the end of the day, that's going to be what it's going to be.
Yes, sir.
Your challenges on day to day, I've got to, for students, I've got to go, I've got class tomorrow. I need to be there on time,
Yes, sir.
prepared to listen, to gain that knowledge so that I can make a decision about my life going forward. It may be different from what your parents experienced. That's okay. But at least understand why you're going that way. Because there is some conditioning. Everybody goes through that. That's why college is such a transformative moment. Because when students get here, they're away from the influence of their parents for the first time. And they're trying to make decisions for themselves and what kind of person they're going to be. Now, your parents put something in you. Hopefully it'll stick, it'll come out. Do your best, be on time, treat people with respect. Hopefully that'll still be there. But there's still this idea of, you know, if we're talking politics, we get into the left and right and which way should I go, what's good for me. Your views on what works for you may be different than what worked for your parents.
Okay.
That doesn't mean that they were wrong.
Yes, sir.
And it certainly doesn't mean that you as a young person who barely at the house, you don't know everything. And there's some young people that embrace it. Oh, my parents, they don't know. What do you know? You know, at this point, you don't even pay your own bills. Somebody else is doing that for you.
Yes, sir.
But it's still that I respect you enough to listen to what is being said, but I'm still learning. This is a learning process. And look, in this life, you never stop learning. There's always something that you don't know because you haven't seen it all yet. Your elders have seen more than you. Maybe they haven't seen it all, but they've definitely seen more than you.
Absolutely.
Now, I do recognize that we live in a generation, a time where some young people have seen more than young people should see. Let's acknowledge that. And there's some experiences that folks have had at 15 that 15-year-olds shouldn't experience. I get it.
Yes, sir.
But there's still some things that you don't know. And the whole idea is to move this community forward, not fight, have that internal struggle where we're not advancing, where we're not growing. The idea is to grow. The idea is for you to have a better life than your parents. And they should have had a better life than their parents. It's got to be a step-by-step process. Some people are lucky, hit the lotto, great. Most of us won't. It's going to be a day-by-day struggle.
Yes,
So
sir.
every time you put your feet on the floor, what am I going to accomplish today? What am I going to do today that's better than what I did yesterday?
Yes, sir.
And when we're talking politics, I've got to begin to understand the rationale behind some of these political theories and how they fit. And I may even have to understand why someone has a different political view than me.
Absolutely.
And we should be able to have that conversation without it turning into a yelling match. Or someone saying, you don't know, you don't. No, why do you believe such and such?
Yes, sir.
Okay, I get it. We had that conversation. That's what this should be about. Learning, conversing. And at the end of the day, I may not agree with you. That still doesn't mean that you're a bad person.
Yes,
It doesn't mean that I'm a better person because of my political beliefs. It doesn't mean that. Maybe we need to find a middle ground where we can still converse and move this thing forward.
Would you even constitute that same value to some political opinions that may be more destructive than others, or have more of a more obvious negative attitude than others?
So
Radical opinions.
So yes, but sometimes you have to agree to disagree.
Absolutely, yeah.
You know, I'm gonna let you have your opinion, but I don't necessarily share that. And then there's an instance, you know, in my family where I've asked a question, do you think they really believe what they're saying?
Yeah, that's a good one.
I hear you. I'm like, do you really believe that? Or is this the party line that you're saying, you know, that you're espousing? And I'm wondering, that doesn't even make sense in your life. Because I don't see you living that.
Yeah, yes, sir.
So, you know, help me, you know, and I've had that, help me reconcile this. Because I hear what you're saying, but I see you, and the two don't always match up.
Yes, sir.
So it can be radical, and that's fine. But when I don't see that matchup, I'm like, okay, let's agree to disagree, and give me 5 more cards, and let's keep this going. You
Yes,
know.
sir. So moving on to just a conversation shifting more about political and social dynamics, what role does polarization play in our current political climate?
I think we are arguably more polarized today than we've been since the civil rights movement, maybe, in the 50s, 1950s, 1960s. Some of the polarization has always existed. It's never gone away. But now we see it more overtly than I think we've seen it in a while. And that's a shame. That's unfortunate. And it makes one has to be aware now of where you are. Physically. Certain places in Texas, I'm uncomfortable. I just came from a conference in West Texas, and my wife, accompanied me there, and at one point I was like, look, we got to get back to the hotel. It's getting dark.
Yes, sir.
I'm not going to be out here, So, and it's unfortunate, but this is the world we live in, and sometimes we gotta play the hand that we're dealt.
Yes, sir.
I don't like it. I don't think it is the best thing for American society as a whole, but this is where we are. And it's a potentially dangerous time, especially for a young black man. Yes, you need to be, cognizant of your environment wherever you go.
Yes, sir.
What do you say? It's polarization is real. It exists, and we need to acknowledge it and behave accordingly. And hopefully, this too shall pass. But today, this is where we are.
Yes, sir. Absolutely. So as we speak on just more current initiatives and policies that are happening, how do we see levels of polarization affect that? And how do we see that even in places like our HBCU right here?
So our HBCUs are living in this moment. And we are living at a time where certain initiatives that were initially designed to bring some balance into our society are being taken away. So the result of that is what? So that balance, we're going back to an imbalance. HBCUs were created, Prairie View was created to educate the children of former slaves, period.
Yes, sir.
Should that mission consolidate to that again? Because we've moved beyond that. Mm-hmm. Should we retract back to that?
Okay.
Now, the challenge with that, we live in an age where your generation has the opportunity to go to any school that you can, one, afford, and two, have the grades to get into.
Okay.
So you got a choice. When you look around this environment, many black students, black families choose not to go to HBCUs. Should we have a conversation on why?
I believe that we should.
Okay. I think that conversation is past due. But many would say, because many alumni that show up during homecoming, they don't send their kids here. They come. They come back, talk about what great time they had, and I remember Alumni Hall and all the great things we did. But my child goes to a school in Dallas, or a school in Austin, or a school out in Lubbock. And you say, well, why come you? Well, I want my child to have a better school, better experience than what you had. You're an architect. You're an engineer living in your gated community. Obviously, it served you well.
Yes,
something worked.
Yes, sir.
So why would you say you want them to have better? So that's a us issue. We can't. That's not outside. That's a us.
Yes, sir.
And we need to address that.
So addressing, the young black community, and as we're putting ourselves in positions and, going to places like Prairie View, how do we put ourselves in other positions to make real political change? We talk about our young voters a lot on this TV show, this talk show. And what do we do to put ourselves in those positions of change and make real effects, real positive change?
So voting, that's in this democracy, that is the way. But you've got to know what you're voting for. And you've got to be judicious about your voting power and how you exercise who you support, what policies that you support. That's the only way. You've got to become informed about those things around you and what impacts you. Because some of the issues that I see on campus, and folks show up and, well, you ought to vote for this, you ought to vote for this. Okay, y'all don't know who those people are.
Yes, sir, absolutely.
And the question would come in, well, who are you? What is your position on this? How do you see this, and what change can you make? And look, there's also this recognition that some of the folks in power can't always affect change because we live in this party system. Mm-hmm. And if one party has more votes than the other party, guess who's going to get what they want?
It has more votes.
They have more votes.
Yes, sir.
So I can scream all day long, but when it's time to vote, they don't have the power. But how do we make influence? What is it that I have to do to influence those folks that are in power to let them know, I'm here. Mm-hmm. And even though the folks that I want to vote for are not in a quote unquote majority, you're still accountable.
Yes, sir.
To me as a voter. And what can I do to influence you to see that?
Yes, sir.
And that may change from election to election, mm-hmm. from year to year. But you've got to be engaged. And you've got to come from a place where you are taken seriously. Mm-hmm. And I can't stress that enough. If you represent not just your vote, but you represent the power of those folks that have come before you, and how you carry yourself and represent yourself, you represent the school, the alumni who've gone here, your own parents, and that means something. Mm-hmm. And that should be taken seriously.
Absolutely.
You don't just represent you. And when people see that, then they'll step back and say, okay, what did you say again? And now I'm listening.
Yes, sir.
Versus, yeah, I got you.
Yes, sir.
And what always bothers me is when I'm talking to people and they're not writing anything down. So I'm sharing, you ask me what I want, and I'm telling you,
they're not writing it down.
Ain't nobody writing it down. So what does that tell me?
You're not really listening.
You're not really. You're being patient. Like, yes, that is a problem. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Yes, sir.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that with me. Now, some people have, can so-call that up.
Yes, sir.
They've got that kind of mind. Most folks,
no, they don't.
So that tells you something right there.
Yes, sir.
You ask, but you really don't want to know. So are you the person I want representing me? I don't care what your party is. So that's something that I think as young people, you just need to be aware of and learn and take all that in and get as much knowledge as you can about any particular issue.
Well, I hope you guys are listening. This is wonderful knowledge. And as we close, I have one final question. Looking ahead, what should academics, journalists, and policymakers be watching as we continue this year?
As we continue this year, I think there are some changes that are coming. There are some changes that are already underway. Academics are going to be mindful of their research and research topics, or else they'll never see the light of day. Journalists, I believe, are concerned that if they espouse a belief that is different, they may be silenced, forcefully silenced. Students need to pay attention to where they are, what's going on, because the fight is not over.
Absolutely.
And they need to figure out, how do we continue with some of the agenda items that were presented by their great grandparents in the 50s and 60s, which is just, I want to be able to live where I want without being harassed. I want to be able to shop at the store I want, that I have money to afford without people looking at me crazy or making, lewd comments. I want to be able to live my life on my own terms.
Okay.
Because some of that is being challenged right now.
Yes, sir.
A lot of that is being challenged right now. So I think over this next year, you need to be kind of aware of what's going on, because a lot of policies are done quickly without much publicity, and then what you see is, oh, well, we already voted on this. This is what we're going to do.
Yes, sir.
And hold people accountable. When did that happen? How did that happen? Was there a public discussion about this? And if so, who voted for this? So when we start talking about our elected officials, you need to know who's voting for what. We've got 100 bills being produced in the legislature. Who's supporting that?
Mm-hmm.
It's public knowledge. You can find it. And those people that are supporting policies that are not to your best interest or to the best interest of your community, the next time they come up for re-election, guess who you should not vote for?
No. Yes, sir.
That's how you exercise that power.
Yes, sir.
But you don't know that if you don't look. And that's the part of the education that young people need to be cognizant of.
Well, thank you so much. We enjoyed you so much here having you on Topicality. Hope to see you again, maybe in even a Rolling Hills discussion. It's been great. But that's all for today for this interview, guys, and we'll see you next week for more Topicality. I'm your host, Micah, and
Dr. Ron Goodwin from Prairie View A&M University.
Well, thank you so much again for being here, and we hope to see you for the rest of the episode. Well, that's all for this week.
Make sure to follow KPVU-TV on all social media. Thanks for watching.